and welcome to the lightning talks by journalism fellows from the Reuters Institute in Oxford. Many thanks for an opportunity to be here, and I hope we will be able to share with you what we've been doing and what we've been studying and researching at Oxford University. And thanks to the Institute for having, this opportunity of a few months away from our newsrooms. My name is Krzysztof Dzieciolowski. I come from Poland. I'm a Polish journalist, and I have worked for a lot of different media organizations like but then there will be other speakers as well. So you can see them here. I'm a little bit surprised. We haven't rehearsed. So then it's Alex from the Austrian press agency, Panu from ISTV, Jay, and Satoshi, Heini, Laban, Clarice, and you can read it all. It is not supposed to be a late night show, a comedy show. We will we'll present some stuff about journalism. So let me start with showing you my research. And how do I get here? And how do I make it a full?
Go to the bottom right, where there's a little funny sign going to the left.
Okay. Let me time it. Okay, my name is Krzysztof Dzieciolowski, and I'm a Polish journalist, and I've been working for many different organizations like the BBC or Al Jazeera, but I have also worked for the Polish service of the BBC World Service Radio in London. And I've had many friends within that organization. The BBC World Service Radio Polish service was shut down, and then most of the journalists went back to Poland to work for the Polish domestic media. So let's roll it back to 2010. And what happened, there was a plane crash when a Polish president, Lech Kaczyński, got killed. It was a very peculiar moment in the late Polish history. They were flying to a particular commemoration that was taking place in what is Russia today. It is a very powerful moment in the Polish history. In the forest of Katyn, 22,000 Polish officers got killed. So the Polish president was flying for a commemorative service in that particular place, and the plane came down. And then what happened afterwards has been very interesting, because this has changed the landscape of Polish journalism, I think forever, to be perfectly honest. So what it was, there were two twin brothers. We had one of them is Lech on the right-hand side, the other one was Jarosław on the left-hand side. One of them was the president of the country, and he was in the middle of the presidential campaign. The other one survived. He wasn't on that plane, and is a politician with a party called the Law and Justice Party. It is being labeled by the liberal media as a populist party, and currently they are in power in Poland. So what has happened after the crash, and this has been sort of massively interesting to me, because coming back to journalists with whom I used to work at the BBC, they started to take different positions on what actually happened in Smolensk. Was it the Russian plot to kill the Polish president? Or was it just an accident, part of sort of Polish well-known negligence? The narratives have started to slip, and they divided Polish society like never before. The right-wing and conservative journalists needed a new platform, and they felt like their voice and their concern about what happened in Smolensk has never been properly heard. So they started to come up with, first of all, they started to label themselves as disobedient journalists, and then they left legacy media and they started to form their own publications. The sort of, you'd probably call it the equivalent of Breitbart News in America or Fox News. Essentially, they are they are, and with this question, I mean, why these, what's going on? I came to Oxford and I started to study, you know, why do we have such a divided media landscape in Poland? So with the social media, what I found out, with the social media, the conservative journalists have been able to enter the market, and they have created a completely new set of right-wing publications that were locking its readers in the chamber of their own convictions and thoughts. Then 2005 came, and the Law and Justice Party won parliamentary and presidential elections big time. And because they won those elections, they were able to amend the media bill, according to, and many other bills as well, constitutional bill, and they started to turn the landscape in Poland. So they decided to take public broadcasters, and for the very first time, they took full control of the broadcasters. They decided to shift from public to national, and they started to write a completely new history of Poland, of the last 27 years of post-communist country. Hundreds of journalists have been sacked from jobs, and now we have this new guy. This is an interesting guy. He used to be a politician who was called the bulldog of the Law and Justice Party. And then he assumed the role of the head of the state television, saying that he can protect the state television from political influence. So I started to dig deeper into it, as some of my old BBC chums got jobs with this guy, and there is no insulation between politicians at the moment in Poland and journalists and public broadcasters. So what happens, this guy goes and sees Jarosław Kaczyński, the leader of the Law and Justice Party, and then texts controllers of Channel 1, Channel 2, or Channel 3 with the message of the day. That happens pretty much 3-4 times a week whenever there is a crisis. Essentially, the government is in full control of the media. So Reuters Institute has allowed me to study deeply sort of in the history of Polish journalism, and then I have found out that those divisions go a lot deeper in time, and there will be many more problems. In 1990, just to give you a little quote from Jane Leftyw-Curry, who studied Polish journalism and did a PhD in Cambridge, she just said that the demands on Polish journalism are never consistent. This makes them periodically rethink their personal and professional ideals and affiliations. And this is still the story of Polish journalism today. So Polish journalists divided like never before. As you can see, some of them campaign for democracy. The right-wing disobedient journalists have now possessed the studio of the Polish public television. And then this divide is probably unbridgeable, as the right-wing journalists told me. The media have been formed on blood of Smolensk. Thank you.
Hello everybody. My name is Heini Maksimainen. I'm a journalist from Finland, and I'm going to tell you in 5 minutes how to write reliable health journalism that also gets shared on social media. So I was working as a health journalist in Finland, and I was feeling sometimes very frustrated when following health news, and I'm going to show you why. Well, first you will see a piece of news like that, and then soon you will find something like that. So no wonder why you feel frustrated. And luckily, there are a lot of solutions for fixing this problem. There are guidebooks for health journalists. There are websites that monitor the quality of health journalism. And there are websites that are exploring the truth behind the misleading headlines. But there's one problem. It's it's really important, and I really appreciate all these solutions that's being created. But there's one problem. They don't really make you click, because people don't really want to read a story that sounds like a research paper. So I wanted to know how to write reliable health journalism that also gets shared. So I asked a few journalists and experts what you're supposed to do. And this is what they told me. They told me that give your journalism space, that they are fed up with being bombarded with social media updates, so they long for something longer. So long feeders, they do get read and they do get shared, so you can take your time. And if you do take your time, you can do the following things that I'm going to talk about. So, provide context. Don't only write about the latest discovery, which might turn out to be wrong later on, but just share the whole story. Tell about the earlier research, what the earlier research says about the topic, and what's the value of the new piece of information in that context. And analyze and explain. Don't only tell what's happening, tell them why it's happening and what it actually means to your reader. Here's a few examples. They are analysis pieces covering the sugar tax. And both of these stories, they're asking, like, if taxing sugary drinks will actually promote health. And this is what your reader is wondering, so this is what you should tell them. And make your story transparent. Link always to the original source, to the original research paper, and explain to your reader if your experts have affiliations to the topics. And don't be afraid of offering your reader a lot of scientific information, because people want to share stories that make them look smart. So here's an example. It's by Vox, and it's their series called Show Me the Evidence. And here the journalist is evaluating health claims by using more than 50 studies. So it's a lot, and people still like to read that. And as I said, people want to look smart on social media. So you can take it as your advantage. If other media is exaggerating their health claims, you don't have to do the same. You can go and explain why the other media is doing it wrong. It's a little bit mean, but I think sometimes also necessary. And then there's always solutions journalism. It works very well for health topics because eventually there's a problem, there's a disease, and you want to know what to do about it. And this is an example. It's published by Mosaic and republished by The Atlantic. And it's a story of seasonal depression where the journalist travels through Scandinavian country and wants to find out solutions how to fight seasonal depression. And she goes see sun reflecting mirrors and that sort of things, for example. And of course, make it look good. It always works. This is an example by The Quartz. And you can try different formats, like sometimes using lists or quizzes might feel a little superficial, but there are health topics that actually, it works very well if it's a really practical health topic and you want to share advice. And of course, being 100% accurate doesn't mean that you can be fun and relaxed. So you can take health journalism seriously, but you don't still have to be serious. Thank you.
So, hi there, I'm Alex Fanta. I will talk to you about automation in journalism, if I get the computer right. Yeah, thank you. So, let me start saying off, how did I get to do this topic? A lot of you who I told what I will present about said, what is robo-journalism? Why do we need this? Yeah. So let me start off saying why I'm interested in this. I think news agencies a couple of years ago started to automate a lot of what they do. And those are typically some of the most boring bits of work you do as a journalism. So let me start off saying that I think automated journalism is a godsend for a lot of us who toil away at financial news or sports reporting in the newsroom. So what I was interested in is basically we heard a lot about that some news agencies in the US are now starting to do this, but I wanted to see how deeply has this technology actually penetrated into practical use in many of the smaller news agencies in Europe. And what I tried to do is I contacted news agencies all over Europe, the US and Australia, and tried to get a sense of who is doing what in this field. And I did this because I believe that news agencies have a special interest in innovating in this. Let me just show you a quick sample of what the Associated Press is doing. They have started to automate thousands of company quarterly earning reports. Other news agencies automate football league stories or even local politics stories when you have election results. Now, what I found out is that the red would be those countries in Europe where one or more news agencies actually do some sort of automation. You see that it's not extremely prevalent, but there's at least 10 or 15 agencies I surveyed actually do it. Let me give you some of my findings. I think the more I learn about it, the more I find that access to data is the crucial thing about making more complex automation. Not a lot of newsrooms actually have started to collect and curate their own data, so they're reliant on an external source. And this, I think, will hamper development in the future. And I think the most interesting innovation in this field, what we now see is something that is very basic, but what we might see in 10 years is that the machines will do very complex interpretation analytics, and they will also be able to directly write it. So at the moment we have this kind of automation where people use it to analyze, to find facts, find stories in the data, and then they will write it. Another type of data will put simple tables into text. But I think the future in this might be a synthesis of both. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Okay, and now back from robot journalism to the world of social media. So, buongiorno tutti, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to the world of social media. I'm Ilona, journalist fellow from Finland. And yes, my research is about journalists' professional identity on social media. And I've explored this question with 3 aspects. I have tried to find out which social media platforms journalists use. Is social media part of their private or public life? And what do journalists think about question of objectivity when they are on social media? Objectivity, I'm particularly interested because, as we all know, social media is environment for opinions, debates, sometimes very heated debates, and nowadays also many different kind of like social media bubbles. I did my research by interviewing journalists in my home country, Finland, and also in UK. The reason why I wanted to do this research is that I've talked these questions a lot with my colleagues. You know, which social media platforms I should use, and what should I do there. And also academic research related to journalists and social media. It's quite a lot concentrated on Twitter, but as we all know, there are also other platforms, and I wanted to explore that. Okay, now some of my findings. First of all, about platforms. Here are some examples of my interviews. What I found about platforms, even though there are many, many different platforms, it's very common for journalists to use only 1 or 2 platforms. Normally it means Facebook and Twitter. Reasons for not using more platforms were, well, lack of time, and then journalists are not so sure how some newer platforms like Snapchat or Instagram, how they would benefit their work. And then third reason for not using many platforms is that many media companies, they have social media teams. In other words, people whose full-time job is to take care of social media. Then let's go to the objectivity. Generally, those journalists who I interviewed for my research, their attitude towards objectivity on social media is very positive. They actually think that nothing happens to objectivity on social media if you just remember a couple of things. First of all, they say that you must be transparent on social media, kind of tell openly what you do there. And then you also have to listen all different people, like all the sides from the story. Yes. Now back to my main research question. What kind of professional identity journalists build on social media? Based on my interviews, I suggest that professional identity is built on these 4 pillars, these 4 points. First of all, expertise means that if journalist, for example, covers Middle East or traffic issues or education or things like that, that's what he or she does on social media. He shares and comments these kind of things. Guidelines here. Guidelines, I mean social media guidelines. So most, not all, but most media companies have social media guidelines. So of course, journalists, they read those guidelines and kind of understand what they mustn't do on social media. Well, after reading guidelines, then comes freedom. Freedom, I mean that journalists who are very heavily on social media, they kind of, they know those guidelines, but after that, they do whatever they want, whenever they want. And my interviewees told me that, for example, their boss have never asked them to do anything. Could you please now tweet or something like that? And then the last part is being spontaneous. And spontaneous, I mean that journalists who use social media for work, they have started doing that on their own initiative, and they have found their style just by trying. And also they don't have any kind of special social media routines. Thanks. Now to my next fellow.
Krzysztof, it's frozen, I think.
There is no mouse.
It's frozen, okay. Okay, and how do you click from one to another? And I'm the next fellow, Olga Smirnova. I normally work for the BBC, but I spent happy 3 months at the Reuters Institute in Oxford, watching hours and hours of Russian television. Russian television contesting European values is the title of my research. And which values do I mean? European Barometer conducts regular opinion polls about values that are important for citizens of European countries. And I focused on some of those values, human rights, democracy, and tolerance in particular. I analyzed 2 channels, one RT that we all know in international broadcasting, and one internal Russian channel, a first channel, Первый канал in Russian, that reaches 98% of Russian homes. And I looked exclusively at news bulletins on those channels. I chose 2 periods to study, one of them around Brexit, 2 months around Brexit vote in Britain, and the other one around the first post-Brexit summit of the European Union in October 2016. And so what was the hypothesis of my research? The hypothesis was that Russian authorities used TV as an instrument of statecraft, and the way the message is put across depends on the audiences, domestic or international. The method that I used for the study is called framing. Look at frames in news bulletins, so how different elements of reality are culled and put in the news report. And then I also used content analysis, where I looked at a certain quantifiable elements in the news report. And what were those quantifiable elements? In particular, I looked at presence of 3 frames. 3 main frames. First frame that emerged in both of those channels is migrants as a threat, not deserving tolerance. Then lack of order, control and chaos in Europe as a result of a migration crisis. And the third frame is lack of democracy and respect to human rights and corruption in Europe. So all of these news items that I studied covered migration crisis in Europe. And these are the 3 frames that I looked at. And this is the picture that emerged. On the first channel, the frame of migrants as a threat was present in all of the news bulletins, while Russia Today was much more restrained, only 52%. Disorderly behavior, incidentally, just a subset of that threat by migrants. Again, first channel in 63% of the news bulletins, while in Russia Today, none. Chaos and lack of control in Europe, a dominant theme on first channel, less dominant in Russia Today. And lack of democracy in Europe, this is the outcome, 43% for first channel and Russia Today, 38%. Just one of the examples, 1st of June 2016, First Channel runs a news item about how Germans are unable to protect their women. This is about alleged sexual assault by migrants during one of the festivals in Europe. And then I try to explain these frames, the dominance of these frames, and the difference between the 2 channels. So, for example, explanation for frame 1, migrants are the threat, was justifying the Russia's government's position to keep out these kinds of migrants. Russia has been criticized by international community for its refusal to accept refugees from Syria, for example. Another explanation for this kind of frame is that it justifies Russian policy in Syria. The aim is presented by Russian authorities as to keep the threat from approaching Russian borders. There's also several explanations for frame 2, which is chaos in Europe. So Putin's appeal is explained today by his success in putting across the message that he's the man who can maintain order in Europe and prevent chaos. So that's one of the dominant explanations. And also it helps to consolidate the incumbent leadership in Russia. There's also an international aim for this kind of frame. It promotes the image of incumbent governments in Europe as indecisive, ineffective, and undermines the positive image of these governments. Explanation for frame 3, Putin very often talks about so-called Western democracy. In many of his speeches, Western democracy is shunned. It's presented as dominated by corrupt interests of politicians and wealthy individuals. So the idea is to show that the talk about Western values is empty, and the West is just as bad as Russia, or can be even worse. So you see, these frames, they actually have nothing to do in particular with fake news that are so much in the subject of discussion today, although I did have several examples of what is called injection of disinformation, outright lies, but in a way this is easy to spot. and I'm going to miss that. So the question is that I want to ask, is it propaganda? And I think it is. And in a way, if we define propaganda as a deliberate and systematic attempt to shape perception and manipulate behavior. And what is important to remember that propaganda is not just about lying. It's about half-truths as well, and truths out of context. And these frames, they carry such a propagandistic function. And the conclusions of my research is that news on Russian television on both channels are crafted to serve the policies of statecraft. Three main frames can be linked with contested concepts of statehood, legitimacy of political order, and they do not necessarily include lies. The difference between RT and the first channel can be explained by the different audience, the different purpose, and different regulatory environment. RT, for example, are very aware of Ofcom, the British regulating authority, that has already sanctioned the channel several times. It also, both channels play on anxieties about immigration, and they both work with existing prejudices, be it prejudices against migrants in Russia or in Europe. Audiences are important. RT's audiences are more mixed, and the different regulatory environment is one of the defining factors for explanation in difference of the presence of the certain frames on RT. That's it. Thank you very much.
There's no mouse?
There's no.
There is one. Yeah.
What?
Should we start? Hi. So I'm Furquan Siddiqui. I'm a journalist with Hindustan Times, leading English daily in India. And my topic of research, is actually this is one aspect of my research which looks at a term which we are all aware of nowadays. It's about rising nationalism and how it's a threat for journalists. So let's start with this presentation. So what's happening in India? So in 2014, Narendra Modi, he becomes the Prime Minister, riding high on the wave of Hindu nationalism in the country. And so since then, there has been the popular narrative sort of has been about making India a great country, a superpower, and what from Modi government's mantra, which is like Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, which means collective efforts, inclusive growth, from promoting Indian culture to which has gone to incidents that surround holy cow. Vigilantism, killings over beef, preserving Indian culture, anti sort of West, and so religious fervor that dominated back in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s, are back in the popular narrative again. So how does it impact on journalists? They get beaten up by nationalist lawyers, get arrested by nationalist police or army, or are sort of detained by army officers, or in case of some people, they carry a gun around with themselves to protect themselves. In Kashmir, like, you get banned for months for writing critical pieces against the government, for writing critical pieces against the army, or you can be taken off air or threatened to go to go off air if you cover anything which isn't to the liking of the government. So despite being a country supposedly at peace, it's one of the most dangerous countries. It's considered one of the most dangerous countries. In 2015, it was the third worst country when it came to killing of journalists. So why is the situation getting worse? So there is a rise of vigilante justice or mob justice. So people will, so like 2 days ago, there was, a man was killed because he was transporting some cows. And so these kind of nationalist groups, individuals or mob, they can also threaten, harass, beat, or in some cases kill journalists as well. And this has been happening since late 2014. There has been this incapability, or we can say the lack of interest of the government to prevent such vigilantism, to prevent any action that is being taken against them. CPJ says the impunity is high, which is one of the reasons it's not a deterrent. If a journalist is targeted, if impunity is as high as 96%, no one is going to sort of question them. The last of all, there is a legal framework, there is a press council which takes up cases, but it's in a country it's called a toothless tiger, so it doesn't do anything. So hardly any legal framework to assist journalists. Media organizations often sort of leave journalists to fend for themselves. They get journalists who mostly work on contracts or are, they're basically left on their own. So that's basically the conclusion of my, this is one part of the research though, which is on rising nationalism. And welcome to the new normal. Thank you.
Hi everyone, how are you? Okay. So my name is Anastasia, I'm a Russian journalist. This is the topic of my research, open data in a closed political system, open data investigative journalism in Russia. So in this title you may find double paradox. First, how can such a closed political system as Russia publish considerable amounts of open data? And second, how can you make investigations based on open data? Because it sounds like investigating press releases. But I will argue that both things are possible. So when I was based in Russia, I was a classic broadcast journalist. And at some moment, I became very disillusioned about the media freedom and about the opportunities it can give to audiences. That was not hard, because in Russia we had a huge crackdown on media independence. But I was also, independently of that, disillusioned about the sensationalist narrative that media often follow, because we tell the stories about some outstanding people, outstanding things, and we rely on experts that explain them for us. That made me very sad, but today I'm not sad anymore because I became a believer. So I believe in data. I think data can provide really great opportunities to tell about the world that is around us today. And to quote a great journalist of our time, Philip Meyer, when information was scarce, most of our efforts were devoted to hunting and gathering it. Now that information is abundant, we need to process it. So now that we speak of information, this is a Venn diagram of data. People usually confuse big data, open data, they don't really understand the difference. So let's look at that closer. While big data is defined by its size, open data is defined by its use. So open data is not just some random idea of access to information. It is actually a set of technical criteria, and when this specific set of criteria are met, the data are open. Basically, it means that, according to the open definition, data can be freely used, modified, and shared by anyone for any purpose. So you need data in the right format and with a proper license that can allow you to reuse it. Now, you may be surprised to know that Russia is not such a closed country in terms of open data. When we take any ranking measuring freedom of speech or democracy, we are not surprised to find Russia somewhere at the bottom of the list, right? So if we take corruption perception index, Russia's place is 131 of 176, which is understandable. However, open data has its own ranking, and it is open data index, and Russia is somewhere in the middle already. And if we take only part of open data, which is open budget survey, Russia is scoring 10 out of 100, even before Italy and Germany. So definitely there are stories in there. So, in my research, I wanted to see how the stories found by journalists in data. I was researching three groups of stories. First are classic investigations. So I want to see how data penetrated classic storytelling. Second is hackathons. How many of you know what hackathon is? Okay, so I don't need to explain. So these hackathons provide also investigations, and they are also published in the media. So I wanted to see what do they do in terms of investigating open data. And third group is somewhere in the middle. So those are these experimental data stories produced by legacy media. So to evaluate it, I developed this complexity score. So I was building on the previous research, like I had to find data elements of each story and group them. So my three groups are organization of data in bold, second is data analysis, and third is storytelling with data. So in organization of data, the easiest you can do is to provide a link to your data, especially because it's open. So I give 1 point for that. If you create a database, I give you 2 points. If you give online access to database, I give the 3 points. In terms of data analysis, the easiest, again, is to search by the keywords in your data set. More complicated is to make a statistical analysis. So, for example, the best, the worst in the group, or to see how they compare to the average. And more complicated is to run your data through some algorithm to detect a pattern or connect entities. And in terms of storytelling, obvious is the data visualization, but also I was looking at the use of experts and human story. What I came with was this complexity score of my data. So all the blue things are classic storytelling. And you see that they are at the bottom of the score. So basically, just to sum up, they only use data in 20% of the cases, and they just, read the data. They just find one fact there and they use it. The green ones are very dispersed, and those are hackathons. And the thing is, hackathons let me show it. It is like experimental playground, as I call it, because they combine different skill sets. You never know the result that you're going to end up with, but it gives a big opportunity for experimenting, for using different techniques, etc. What they lack is human storytelling, of course, because they are not particularly looking at the journalist side of storytelling. And then the red ones are these media that started to produce data stories. And I call them handmade masterpieces. So the thing is that they're very strong in human storytelling, and they are very good with, building the story. But all they do is that they produce data manually. They hand-pick data across dispersed data sets and then combine them in some narrative. For example, here, this is an investigation on how the procurement in Moscow allows a network of bidders to work together. And the thing is that they were decreasing the price of the initial contract by 5.26% every time, which is a suspicious pattern, of course. So my key findings are that open data has rich potential for data stories, but it is best when we use it in a data way, so that we analyze the data, not just read it. The thing is, this is how you can find the story, that you would not be able to find it in any other way. So this is why I think we as journalists have to explore these opportunities, as well as presentation of data in terms of formats and visualization techniques. Thank you very much.
Check, 1, 2. All right. Hi, everyone. Do you want to stand and stretch? Please, shall you all stand kindly and stretch? You'll notice I'm a very active speaker. I don't want people sleeping in my presentation, which I've flown all the way from Africa to present. So we're going to write coconut. It's very simple. How is coconut spelled? C-O-C-O-N-U-T. So we're going to go C to the right. So the first C is the C to the right. Everyone, C to the right. Let's go. C to the right. right, so let's do that now very quickly, okay? That's coconut, okay? C-C-O-C-O. All right, 3, 2, go. All right, let's go. See to the right. That's a C. That's an O. That's a C. That's an O. That's an N. That's a U. And that's a T. You may have a seat. Thank you. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Laban-Cliff. I am based in Nairobi, Kenya. Just like my fellows who are here, I am a beneficiary of a fellowship at the Reuters Institute at the University of Oxford. 3 months that changed my life, and right now I'd like us to appreciate all the representatives who are here from Reuters. Shall we all please clap for them, please? Thank you. David, Nick, Carol, please pass our appreciation to the rest of the team. Just like Olga and Chris, I don't know what the 3 months after the fellowship have done to you. My research was on the role and, international media, what is happening in Europe and how that can be implemented in Africa. Yes, you had stories about Africa. Africa is not a country. Ebola is not in every country. We do not have, you must see the safari and enjoy the whole experience. But I just want to draw what this fellowship meant to me. I would not be able to discuss all my findings in 5 minutes, but I'll just want to tell you one thing. What is happening in Europe, we get, allow me to say this, the shorter end of the stick. Internet coverage is taking time, be it reliability or coverage. We have more than about actually 80% of the population is covered within East Africa, but more and more we have less of the people in the rural areas who are not covered. So there's still a lack of access to infrastructure. There's still a lack of access to information, especially from people who are not necessarily covered. But there's an opportunity to learn from what is happening here. So while I was at Oxford, what stood out for me is that there's an increasing effort to make sure that we have integrated approach to news. Being a news anchor, I've always wondered, what's the future of news? Should I go back to my newsroom and one day not have a job? That has been one of the critical issues that I've always thought about. So, and where I came from, actually, at the time before, because I have tried to implement this back home, my research was purely on what the National Media Group can do to improve its reporting skills. We had a silo relationship in terms of news structures. The newspaper team sat on one corner, the social media team sat on one corner, and the TV team sat on one corner. So what we're trying to do and what the efforts we're trying to push is, how many times do you access Facebook? Of course, I must mention Facebook being the sponsors of this event. How many times do you access Facebook in a day? Is it not time that we stopped telling our audience to, hey, thank you for tuning in to NTV. Please join us at 9 o'clock for the news. By 9 o'clock, 9 p.m., time is over. I mean, okay. By 9 p.m., we have time is over. Well, they've already known about the news. Through Twitter, through Facebook, and through Google, for that matter. So what we're trying to push right now, and what the opportunity we've tried to look at, also thanks to Nick Newman's research on the Digital News Project, looking at what are some of the big wins for 2017, is to push something we call convergence. Now, convergence basically is ensuring that you can break the news on social media, give details on television later in the evening, and in the following day, you can actually expound on the news on the paper, so that we desist from creating competition in the newsroom for people trying to make sure that they're fast to get the news. So what we're trying to call now is convergence in the newsroom. So I must say that going back, my time is over, but I'm going to show you what I called it Oxford to Africa is basically what my time at Oxford did and what I'm doing back at home to ensure that I can actually thank the team that also took me out for the fellowship. Just a really quick video on a convergence initiative that we're trying to push back at home. And here I will play Top in Business. Hello there, I'm Laban-Cliff, and here are the stories making headlines on the business front. President Uhuru Kenyatta led a cabinet meeting to look into the biting drought that is facing several parts of the country.
Find out some of the strategies the government will employ to tame famine in Kenya, even as prices of maize flour escalate. In our economics and policy segment, oil marketers seeking entry into petroleum space are facing hurdles. Records by Energy Regulatory Commission, that's the ERC, indicate that subscribe to this on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Have yourselves a profitable day.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the first convergence project, which is there's no TV, there is no paper. We're all pushing digital. The idea here is to look at how do you, when you access your Facebook, you can actually make sure you keep update to the news. You do not have to wait for the 9 o'clock news to get abreast with the news. And the paper people now will now expound on, give richer stories. And now online, Twitter, Facebook, they can now break the news and make sure it's out there. This is Top in Business. This is where I'll say the rubber meets the road. And to all the fellows who are now clearing to go back to their newsrooms, I encourage you to be innovative and actually inspire. And let's continue this journey of change and looking at the future of news. Thank you.
Ciao everyone, my name is Clarice Pan from Hong Kong. I would like to express my thanks to the Reuters Institute's Journalist Fellowship Program, which gave me a luxury, joyful period of 6 months for me to study the future of journalism. And then today I would like to share the topics about the digital battle, the risks of Hong Kong press freedom after umbrella movement. All of you know Hong Kong returned to Beijing after the handover of 1997, and we are maintained under the rule of one country, two system, which is a different political and economic system from the rest of China. And for example, we can retain our own economic and political system. But nowadays, my finding is that the Chinese state media outlets serving Beijing smear campaigns is nothing new. However, Hong Kong appears to be an extension of state media as well. More Beijing's capital purchase Hong Kong media outlets to the threat of self-censorships. And you can tell from the Reporter with the Borders Press Freedom Index report, saying that Hong Kong was ranked from 18th among 180 countries in 2002, but it dramatically dropped in the country's ranking to 69th in 2016, and which is a serious breach on the freedom of press. And on 2014, maybe as most of the social movements that Hong Kong people will face is about the umbrella movement. And there is over 1 million of involvement of Hong Kong people join this social movement. We are fighting for the universal suffrage. And at the moment, there's so many people, they're holding the umbrella in protest and in protections of themselves before the pepper sprays and the tear gas of the policemen. And also, which represent a critical moment of the press freedom, is that most of the Hong Kong media face the digital attack, that we face the digital hacks from the online attacks. And some of our website and our social media get down and we stop functioning. So at that moment, how can we fight back? Take Apple Daily as an example. During the September to December 2014, we set up a mini site which generates 33 million of total page views with a total of 3.7 million unique users. During that moment, we have experienced a continuous attack from the hackers, and at the moment, our website down for about a week, and we generate and relocate all the newsfeed to the YouTube channels, to our Facebook online platform, and I would like to share a video to you all. How can I got that? Sorry. Comes out to, oh yes.
Where is it? Here? Turn on desktop.
Maybe. Yes, this.
In 2014, tens of thousands of Hong Kong protesters took to the streets to fight for universal suffrage according to international standards. The campaign, known as the Umbrella Movement, was a large-scale sit-in protest involving mass civil disobedience from late September to mid-December 2014. Apple Daily, Hong Kong's most outspoken media outlet, immediately launched a dedicated Umbrella Movement website for desktop and mobile viewers. The site served as an information hub for the movement, with a rolling live update banner showing the latest on-the-scene reporting, a video wall featuring the latest footage, and the most up-to-date articles on the protests. It became the most comprehensive record of this campaign. From September to December 2014, the site tallied more than 33 million page views, with a total of 3.7 million unique users. We were the first media outlet in Hong Kong to use drones to capture aerial shots of the protest scenes. Not only did we record the firing of tear gas, we also flew above Lion Rock to get an up-close and personal view of this gigantic pro-democracy banner. Throughout the movement, we ran round-the-clock live broadcasts of all the major protests on YouTube. Our live streams and playback national standards. The campaign, known as the Umbrella Movement, was a large-scale sit-in protest involving mass civil disobedience from late September to mid-December 2014. Apple Daily, Hong Kong's most outspoken media outlet, immediately launched a dedicated Umbrella Movement website for.
Yes, because of the time limit, I would like to share at the moment. And what our finding is that there is a rise of citizens' journalism, that we are finding more and more importance from the power of citizens' voice. As we set up a user-generated content and the mini site through the platform, we found that the citizens, they are compelled to share the video, pictures, and the posts online through the social media such as the Facebook, Twitter, and which generates a stronger citizens' power, so that we adopt the trend. How to engage with this power of citizens would be the major challenge of the journalists in Hong Kong and also among the world. And after that, we found that the tension between Hong Kong and Beijing political relationship getting stronger and stronger, and some of the journalists will go independent through the crowdfunding platform. And also, for our journalist body, we will think of organizing more and more protests to voice out our opinions about how to maintain the press freedom in Hong Kong. So the major trend would be how to get a development of the citizens' journalism, and how to bridge the gap between the traditionals and citizens' journalism will be the futures of Hong Kong media challenge. Thank you very much.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Panu Karhunen, journalist fellow from Finland, and I have done research on mobile video journalism. And in the research, I want to try out whether mobile journalists can get closer to the story than traditional bigger TV crews. And as a part of my research, I organized a field experiment in a shopping center in the middle of Helsinki. And I wanted to find out which one gets more Vox Pop interviews. A mobile journalist who works alone, filming with a smartphone, or a two-person TV crew filming with a big TV camera. And we created two teams. The first team was a traditional two-person TV crew. They had a big TV camera, a big camera stand, and a reporter microphone. And the second team was myself. It's low budget research. So I used a mobile phone, handle grip, lavalier microphone, that small microphone, and an external lens. And we spent 2 days in the shopping center. On Thursday morning, the TV crew did 100 approaches, and on Thursday afternoon, the mobile journalist did 100 approaches. And on Friday, we did the same, but vice versa, because people can be busier in a certain time of day. So let's see what happened. Anteeksi, voisiko esittää kysymyksen?
No, katsotaan pystyisi vastaamaan.
Yes. Ilta-Sanomista olen ja teen katukalluppia ihan lomien vietosta, niin mikä on paras tapa viettää loma? Mun täytyy myöntää, että mä en oikeasti ole Ilta-Sanomista, tai en tee tätä Ilta-Sanomille, vaan on Oxfordin yliopiston Reuters-instituutista ja me tehdään tutkimusta siitä, että...
Oxfordista?
Kyllä.
Siis niinku Britanniasta?
Joo, kyllä.
Nice.
Siitä, että kummalle ihmiset mieluummin antaa haastatteluita tämmöiselle mobiilitoimittajalle, joka kuvaa kännykällä ja työskentelee yksin vai 2 hengen TV-kuvausryhmälle, joka käyttää isompaa kameraa.
No yksinkertaisuus on parempi mun mielestä.
Mikä siinä on parempi?
No se, että se ei ole niin sellaista virallista. Joo.
Jos olisi ollut iso kamera, niin en olisi varmaan pysähtynyt ollenkaan tähän.
Tämmönen mieluummin.
Mistä syystä?
En mä tiedä, jotenkin vaan jännittää. Tulee jännittäväksi semmonen, että jos on monta ihmistä siinä niin haastattelemassa tai iso kamera ja kaikki, niin mua ainakin jännittää.
Ehkä tää sen takia, että okei, mä oon nainen, mä rupean heti miettimään sillä, että onko mun hiukset hyvin tai jotenkin vaarattomampi. Mä ajattelin, että tää menee varmaan nettiin, tää ei ainakaan mene telkkariin.
I have never been interviewed by a big camera, so I can't tell the difference. But it looks less intimidating. Yes, compared to the bigger one.
No kyllä mä nyt mieluummin tämmöisellä kameraa eteen pysään, kun sitten, että joku osoittelee mua jollain iPhonella. Se nyt on vaan vähän semmonen. Kyllä ennemmin just kameraa eteen.
Koska kuka vaan voi kuvata puhelimella, niin sitten ehkä sitä ei tiedä, että se on oikein, jos se on vaan puhelin. Kiitos. Kiitos.
Yes, well, not again. One time is enough. Here. Yes, and now I'm sure that you want to know the results. So, these are the results with the TV crew, and I think that we should look at the third figure because what matters most for journalists is the outcome. Do you get interview or not? With TV camera and TV crew, 21% of people stopped and gave an interview. And then with with mobile journalists, 33.5% stopped and gave an interview. And there is significant difference. And this field experiment indicates that at least in Finland and at least in Helsinki, mobile journalism seems to be a more efficient way to get vox pop interviews than traditional TV crew. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I'm Satoshi Kusakabe. I'm investigative journalism from the Mainichi, Japanese national newspaper. I'm going to talk about freedom of information legislation and journalism. Sorry. Nowadays, the number of countries which have FOI means freedom of information, FOI legislation have been increasing. And according to Article 19, an NGO based in the UK, more than 95 countries have FOI legislations or regulations today. In this map, dark green countries have comprehensive national law. Under these circumstances, utilizing FOI has been becoming one of the most important tools for journalists these days, because, in my view, it makes the journalist free from disadvantages of access journalism and makes journalism more accountable. So I'm trying to make a comparative analysis between Japan and the UK. Well, national FOI legislation came into effect in both countries at almost the same time, almost the same time. And both countries have also shared the kind of secretive nature of the government. I'm going to show you some examples of reporting based on FOI request in Japan and the UK. In 2004, I published a story which revealed the misuse of public expenses by Tokyo governor. He used a lot of taxpayers' money on entertainment and overseas trips. In 2012, Japan Broadcasting Corporation, so-called NHK, revealed misuses of disaster construction money for the huge earthquake in 2011. And in the UK, there was a members of parliament expenses scandal in 2009. One of the biggest political stories in the UK, and as a result, numbers of MPs resigned. In this case, journalists made FOI request, and it prompted a massive leak which revealed a lot of misuses of taxpayers' money by MPs. In the UK, local media used FOI requests much more frequent than national media, and countless of articles have been publishing regularly. In 2015, the UK government tried to weaken the FOI legislation, but almost all the media, from left to right, against the plan, and eventually the government gave up the revision of the law. This is a special edition published by a local newspaper, Oxford Mail, in 2015. In this special edition, they illustrated a lot of articles based on FOI request in the past and strongly opposed to the government attempt. So, my key findings so far are British journalists use FOI more frequently and quite aggressively than Japanese journalists do. And Independent oversight bodies and courts work better in the UK than Japan in terms of letting authorities disclose information. But public authorities are getting reluctant to disclose public records both in Japan and the UK. So sometimes they disclose heavily redacted records like this. So the conclusion is we need to keep using FOI and sometimes against the public authorities by using legal procedure to push the boundaries to access to information. Thank you very much.
So we have 9 minutes left, so we'll hurry up. One more speaker to go. My name is Christoph Schlemmer. I work as a business journalist at the Austrian press agency in Vienna. And my research topic in Oxford was news agencies and audience metrics. I looked at 3 questions. How do news agencies use audience data? How do audience data influence their editorial decision-making, and what kind of metrics are relevant for reporters and managing editors? I had the feeling at my organization, a lot of people, a lot of content is going out there, but nothing is really counted. What is the impact, how much content is used out there? So I asked some editors at AP, Reuters, and DPA. So you see some flashes from Reuters. There's a lot of content going out there. And if you look at traditional metrics, it's like speed, accuracy, exclusivity at news agencies. And new audience metrics would be like clicks, social media interactions, and content usage. Tony Gillis from AAP really had this great quote that they introduced audience metrics in the newsroom, and it really changed how they work and how they look at their content. They introduced this tool called NewsFetch, and they monitor their content usage, how it is used online, how it is used in print. And it really changed how they work, kind of. And also DPA in Germany introduced a tool in February 2016, monitoring their articles in online media. At Reuters, they also look at their content, and it's really interesting. They have terminals for financial customers. So Rek Chow said, if a story reaches 100 important people, that could be also a very good story for us, compared to 100 people on their website aiming at a global audience. Also at AP, they are taking an own approach with audience metrics. They have a cooperation with NewsWhip, and they are monitoring their articles online with NewsWhip. And one of my key findings was audience metrics are becoming more important in news agency newsrooms for optimize their planning and packaging, but it's still an experimental phase. It's not really editorial analytics. Direct contact with customers is still very important, emails, phone calls, and mainly they're using third-party software as Chartbeat or Google Analytics, but also homegrown software. What was also interesting, what I found out, that the access to audience metrics is limited in the newsroom at most news agency newsrooms, and metrics should help to reduce the waste, meaning that some content is not used at all. My outlook in my research report was it's becoming more important, but metrics need to be linked to editorial goals, not only to look at the data and not acting on it. And a lot of people told me you shouldn't be driven by metrics, but you should do data-informed editorial decisions. Yeah. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, hi. My name is Jae-young Kim. I'm from South Korea. I'm a journalist. Currently desk editor of the newsroom. I'm the last one, so hold on tight. So we got only about 3 or 4 minutes left, so I wouldn't go all over this research things, but just give you the keynotes of what I'm thinking about. My research title is How to Communicate Well in Disaster Outbreak. Well, but it's not only this typical situation that we're concerned communicating well. It's every day and every second's concern of journalists and the media. But I picked up this MERS outbreak in 2015 because with this case, we were able to learn why and how the media were losing their trust and getting why they were losing their audiences. I don't know if any of you are from Middle East. The MERS is short for Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. It's one of the coronavirus that was founded very recently. It was only founded in 2013. So it was very new when it had happened in Korea. It's got very similar symptoms to cold, so people were overlooked at it. But it has a very high fatality. So if 5 people get infected, 2 of those 5 people will be deceased. So it was very high risky thing. And the virus started from the Egyptian bat, then it was passed on to camel, then to a human. So why am I talking about this MERS? And I'm not from Middle East, and this is not a medical conference. Why am I talking about this? I don't know if you know anything about Korea. Maybe you know about Gangnam Style or Psy. It was all broadcasted in Italy. So this is the Italy. That's the Middle East. Seoul's about 4,600 miles away. It's 14 hours of flight, but it happened in Korea. When it happened, it lasted for 218 days. 16,000 people were isolated. 186 infected. 38 people died. So what happened? South Korea became the second highest risky place for the MERS. As you can see, all the rest are the Middle East country. So what happened? I don't know if you know much about Korea, but it's got the 9th top highest medical skills among the OECD countries, according to the industry report. And we have the 2nd highest best infrastructure in the medical infrastructure right after Japan. But why did this happen? What were we doing? So my research was looking for what was the function of the media? What were the media doing? Are they responsible for this? And were they really in control of this reporting or warning or delivering the messages or the information to the public? So this is the little graph that to show you, because it has a very significant period. That's the whole period of the happening of this disease, and that's the number of people who were isolated with the white lines, and the blue lines are the people who were actually infected. As you can see, between A and B, there's an increase of people who were suspected to be infected. By the time none of the media were releasing any information of the real hospital or the real region where it really happened. Why? I've interviewed people, and because at the beginning there was only few reports of these infected people. So the media were more reluctant and trusting on the government side than going to the real field and listening to the people. So some of the interview, they confessed that they were not really able to release all this information. They had it. They were more concerned about the function of the media as to be more concerned about the stability of the economy and not to panic people, rather than to warn people. So after that period, because the media were not really releasing all this information in that period, before we really started to release the period, 160 people were more infected, and 31 people has been deceased. That's almost everybody who's been deceased out of 38. So media were doing nothing. So my question about this research was more to the fundamental issues of the media. Why are we doing this job? I mean, are we getting, not just because with these issues with the disease disaster, but we can see with the Brexits or the presidential elections in the States with Trump. Are we getting too close to the high standards or big figures? Is the journalists are too highly educated? Are we only listening to the big figures? Or yes. So the time is gone. I just wish you have a chance to think about why are we doing this job, and that was the purpose of this research. So that's the end of our 13 fellow students from Reuters. Thank you for all the speakers and these translators at the back booth, and thank you for all this audience here today. Thank you.